Welcome to the October 26th edition of Octagon Outlook. I am your host, James Lynch. We got a ton to talk about today, and I had to get someone that could, handle the load. We had UFC 254 last weekend. We've got UFC Vegas 12 coming up. We got a Bellator card, and who better than my former co-host of the Parting Shot podcast, the man at bjpenn.com, MMA Odds Breaker, MMA Rated, Mr. Adam Martin, joining me here on the program. Adam, what's up, man? Good to talk to you.
Dude, it's good to be back, man. I always love doing this like parting shot reunion, James. Now here at Line Movement, man, it's going to be a great show today. I'm excited to talk about it. James, during this weekend, man, I remember those days when me and you used to hang out every Saturday and we watched these big cards. That reminded me of a big card of this weekend, James. It was one of those like big time events. And I feel like there's so much to talk about.
Exactly. So you're the perfect guy to get on here. Really excited about that. Before we get into this, I just want to remind our audience, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, looking to grow the channel. My best interviews end up on here, as well as this show every week at 1:15 p.m. Eastern time. So if you guys want to do that, that would be awesome. But let's talk about UFC 254, Adam. Khabib Nurmagomedov submits Justin Gaethje in the second round and then calls it a career. I wasn't expecting the retirement. I wasn't even expecting Khabib to dominate that much. I thought we'd see a much closer fight than what we saw on Saturday night. But first, just your overall thoughts on Khabib's performance in what was just one of the all-time great lightweight fights.
James, this is the only pick I got wrong all night. I got every other pick right. I thought Gaethje had a chance to beat him. In the first round, he did some work with his low kicks. He was damaging Khabib. Even two judges actually gave him that round. But at second round, James, just the takedown, get the fight to the ground. When have we ever seen him submit a guy like that with a triangle choke like that? Like where he just went right to him, put the legs around the neck, got the submission. Not only did he submit him, he choked him out cold. Jason Herzog missed a couple of taps there. But I don't think we've seen a better performance by him. I think this is the best he's ever looked. I think it was even better than the Conor McGregor fight. Being a guy like Justin Gaethje, James, you know how much I love Justin Gaethje. I've been talking about him for 7-8 years now, since WSOF. So I knew he was good. I thought he actually had what it took to beat Khabib. Who knows if it's a different night, something else could happen. But Khabib showed he is the best lightweight in the world. But I got to be honest, James, I was absolutely shocked when he retired. I was shocked. My mouth dropped, and I was like, oh, my God. And, of course, I get the message from Chris Taylor at bjpenn.com, get to work on that article on him retiring. I was shocked, James, honestly. I couldn't believe it, man.
Yeah. Shout out to Chris Taylor, by the way, one of the best in the business. Yeah, I was shocked, but I wasn't like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like, I did not expect this, to like 1 being like, yeah, I figured this was going to happen. I was probably about a 5. I get it, Adam. I mean, this guy has done everything in the lightweight division. He's beat all the top guys. I don't think there's anyone out there right now that would give him any sort of a challenge. Maybe a Charles Oliveira just because of the style matchup. He's got a good ground game, good striking. But other than that, Khabib's done everything he needs to do at this point. This guy is not about the money. He's not about, everything like that some of the fighters are. He's all about the legacy. He's done everything he needs to do at lightweight. I'll talk more about his retirement sort of after we recap this card. But, I was not like super surprised about it just because of the run that he's been on. But I wanted to talk quickly about the finish. Gaethje landed a shot to Khabib's knee. That was the game plan. You could tell with the calf kicks, he was trying to wear down Khabib's knee, and you could see it was getting red. And I thought this was a good game plan. It was just that one mistake, though, because as he landed that kick, Khabib saw that, grabbed the takedown, got on Gaethje's back, went transition to the triangle choke and got the job done. I see some people saying that Gaethje has terrible ground game. Stop with that talk. I mean, look, he just fought Khabib, who's got some great ground game. Gaethje's first submission loss in 25 career fights. Like this idea that Gaethje was like, people trying to discredit Gaethje. I think they got to look more at how talented Khabib is. I look at more of that as opposed to what Gaethje did, because Gaethje did stop that first takedown when Khabib tried to go for it. And then it was after that where Khabib was able to capitalize. He nearly finished Gaethje in the first round. I think this speaks more to how good Khabib is, as opposed to people saying, oh, Gaethje was terrible. No, he just fought one of the best fighters ever. So like, let's give credit where it's due. What did you think of that whole narrative? Because a lot of people already are coming out and trying to discredit Gaethje.
I agree completely, James. I mean, he did a lot of damage in that first round with the kicks. In fact, 2 judges gave him that first round. So I think he became the first fighter since Conor McGregor who won 1 round, I believe, against Khabib to beat Khabib in a round. Like, he doesn't lose rounds. He doesn't lose fights, James. He doesn't lose rounds either. So I think the fact he even got that first round is a moral victory. And I think it says going forward, this guy is going to be in the mix for the title now if it is vacated, which it looks like it is, although Ali Abdelaziz now is saying it's not vacated. I thought he had a great game plan, James. In the first round, and DC was talking about this, the range. He was staying at the proper range to land those kicks where Khabib could not shoot a takedown because it was too far away. The second round, he made a small mistake, James. And against an elite guy like Khabib, one small mistake can cost you the entire fight. It cost him the fight.
It certainly did. Now, the implications are huge. Like you mentioned, Ali Abdelaziz alluding to the fact that Justin never lost the title. Well, look, if you put your interim belt on the line and you lose, it doesn't matter if the guy retires. You do not have that belt anymore. The belt is vacant. I mean, I'm not going to, we can go on a whole podcast about that, but here's what I'd like to see what's going to happen. And here's what I think is going to happen. What I would like to see is, like everyone, I want to see a tournament. Let's do Connor Dustin. Let's do, you got a mixture of Tony Ferguson, Dan Hooker, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, throw Dariush in there, whoever, it doesn't matter. Just throw like a whole bunch of guys in there and we'll find out who the best guy is. That's not likely going to happen because you know what? The UFC is all about making money. It's a business decision. They're going to do Poirier and McGregor for the vacant title. I don't agree with it. Connor beat a welterweight and Donald Cerrone, who's not even that great of a welterweight, and is now going to get a shot at the title. I don't like that at all. But I mean, that's probably what they're going to end up doing because the UFC, Adam, they want to get Conor McGregor back as a champion as soon as possible. And it's nothing, and he might not even get past Poirier. Poirier's looked great lately, but that is my thinking, is that the UFC is going to go with the Poirier and McGregor fight as a vacant title fight, even though McGregor didn't fight at 55 in his last fight. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I saw Michael Chandler. He suggested a four-man tournament with himself, Tony Ferguson, Poirier, and McGregor. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Although, personally, James, I would expand it to eight-man because I think you can add Gaethje, Oliveira. There's a couple other guys like Paul Felder and a few other guys in the top 10, Dariush, like you mentioned. So I think you could do an eight-man tournament. We know the UFC doesn't love doing tournaments. The last time they did one was the flyweight tournament, James. I remember I actually watched the finale with you when Benavidez and DJ fought. So, it's been a while since they did a tournament. I think it makes a lot of sense. Having said that, I'm 100% with you, dude. They're going to do Poirier Connor at 155 for the belt. UFC 257 in January 23rd, I believe. That's going to be for the vacant 155 title. And then maybe as a co-main, you have Tony Ferguson against Michael Chandler as the backup spot in case someone gets hurt. And if not, the winner gets a title shot, 3 or 4 months later or something like that. So, I apologize. Oh, it's great, man. It's a great question. Right now, I think Gaethje still is technically ranked number 1, right? But Chandler's idea didn't have Gaethje in it. He had Ferguson himself, Poirier, and McGregor. So I think right now, I think Gaethje would be in the tournament, and Chandler would be the guy that wouldn't be because he hasn't even fought in the UFC yet. So for me, the top 4 would be Gaethje, Ferguson, McGregor, and Poirier. So I would probably do. The thing is, you don't want to do the rematch between Gaethje and Ferguson, right? So they'd have to do like a different fight. That's why I think they might put Chandler in instead of Gaethje. But I would assume that Connor would be the top seed just because of the name value.
Last thing, because I know people are going to ask about this, the whole GOAT talk. I hate talking about that because it's really, it's too tough to figure out because look, I can see arguments for Jones, GSP, Khabib. Look, Khabib's had the flawless record, not going to take that away from him. Only 4 title defenses though, whereas guys like Jones and GSP, they did it for a lot longer. I know GSP had some losses. I know GSP probably didn't beat Johnny Hendricks. Adam, you and I watched that fight. We both thought Hendricks won. And then you've got Jones with all the steroid stuff. So it's just too tough of an argument to say one is the GOAT and one is the not. It's fun to talk about, but Marcel, our buddy, at MMA DNA brought up a good point. If we're going to do GOAT talk, it should just be stuck to the weight class. It shouldn't be, Khabib's better than Jones because it's too subjective. It's too hard. I also saw people say that Jones didn't fight anyone good. It's like, do you guys forget that he fought Shogun and Rampage Jackson and Rashad when these guys were in their prime? Like, I don't buy that either. So as far as the GOAT talk goes, I don't think you can determine one over the other. They're all good fighters. I think we can sort of leave it at that.
I'm 100% with you. I'm surprised so many people are like out there just proclaiming Khabib is the number 1 undisputed, obvious GOAT. Like, I don't agree with that. I know it's promoter talk, Dana White, Sean Shelby, those guys, but there's so many fans and media saying this now. And James, 29-0 is impressive. 13-0 in the UFC, it's super impressive. Only 3 title defenses, only 3.
Yeah.
Yes, he did beat 3 great fighters, but only 3. John Jones had, I think, 8. GSP had 9, and Anderson had 10. Demetrius Johnson had 12. I don't think DJ's in the title. I don't think he's in that conversation personally. I believe it comes down to GSP, Khabib, and John Jones. That's what I would say. Because I think Anderson did tarnish his legacy a little bit, James, all the late losses. But to me, James, it's like, are people forgetting what John Jones has did for the last 10 years?
Yeah.
Like, John Jones is still number 1 GOAT pound for pound fighter in the world, in my opinion. He has 16 straight wins or something? Like, he's the number 1 guy, James.
Yeah.
So I'm 100% with you, man.
Yeah, and that we could do an entire show just on the GOAT talk, but I won't because I don't want to waste my time. Let's get to the co-main event. We had Robert Whittaker, Jared Cannonier. I want to point out I called this fight to a T. It almost didn't happen the way I thought it would. I thought Whittaker was going to finish Cannonier, especially when Cannonier fell to the canvas in the third round. But credit to Jared Cannonier. We find out after he did hurt himself early in the fight, was able to persevere and actually landed some good shots in this fight. This was a pretty even matchup for the most part. I know I don't think anyone was surprised that Whittaker got the decision. I felt like he won. I felt like he did enough. But what did you think of this fight? Because, it's one thing to see a fight on paper and think it could go well, but I thought this lived up to the hype. It was a great fight.
Awesome fight. I think it could have won fight of the night, but that Kenny fight in the prelims was obviously the showstopper. But man, it was a great fight, James. And I also predicted Whittaker by decision. Plus 100. I thought
I know.
That's
what I was saying too last week. It was crazy.
Favorite. Yeah. How was he not the favorite in this fight? He's the former champ. What did Cannonier beat Anderson Silva and Jack Hermanson? Okay, good win.
It was because people said that, because people thought that Whittaker lost his chin because he got knocked out by Adesanya. I was hearing people say Cannonier's going to knock him out in the first round. I'm a huge Jared Cannonier fan, Adam, but like he hasn't knocked out anyone notable other than Hermanson.
And he's also 36 years old, James. So yeah. There was a lot of stuff going against him here, which I actually thought that Whittaker at plus 100 as a dog was the best bet of the whole night. So yeah, I agree. I saw it coming, James. Having said that, I mean, it was a competitive fight. Cannonier landed some nasty kicks in that first round. Whittaker didn't check any of the kicks. According to Cannonier, he broke his arm when Whittaker threw a kick in the first round. He broke his arm, I believe, blocking the kick. That's why he wasn't throwing punches back. Because I'm watching, I'm like, why is he only kicking? He's got to mix it up. Third round, he just came alive after that head kick. James, I thought we were going to see Cannonier come back and win the fight in the last minute. But Whittaker ends up persevering. The question is, does he get the rematch with Adesanya? And is it more competitive than the first fight? James, I'll be honest with you, man. He deserves it, but I'm not that interested in it. I'd rather see Adesanya fight Blachowicz or Jones, personally. What do you think?
I will leave that for after we recap this card because I have my own idea of what I think should happen there. But that's a little teaser, as we call in this business, as you know, Adam. It's all good. Let's go along to the heavyweight fight. Alexander Volkov knocks out Walt Harris. I wasn't entirely shocked by this. I always felt like Harris's wins were a little bit inflated in terms of, because he would finish early. Walt's a good fighter, but Volkov is, I think, not underrated. I mean, we discussed this on Saturday, actually, in our DMs, but in general, I think Volkov is a fighter that I think people maybe don't give enough credit to. He's not underrated because obviously he's been favored in a lot of his fights. But what I do look at with Volkov is I think people forget he's only been finished one time in the UFC, and that was to Derek Lewis at the last minute. The only other time he's been finished, I think, was Minikov years ago. This is a guy that he's got a good build for the division. He uses his height and reach very well. I was not surprised for this result. I was surprised so many people were picking Walt Harris to knock him out. I just didn't see that happening. What did you think of this fight? Because Volkov, again, sets himself up nicely in the heavyweight division, and now Harris has lost 2 straight.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying he's underrated. I don't know if I agree with that because he's ranked 7th. So how is he underrated? Because that's where he should be, right? Because he did get knocked out by Derek Lewis. Yeah, he was winning that fight, but he ended up getting caught, James. That was actually on the McGregor and Khabib card, but that long ago. It was 2 years ago. He's looked good lately. I mean, he's definitely a good fighter. He's got the long reach. He's got a good jab. He's got power. But to be honest with James, while Harris is ranked 10, I don't consider him a top 10 fighter in the world. Do you? I never did. No. I never completely bought him. I know that we interviewed him years ago back on the old podcast, James. And
was that the one where he slept in, or who's that guest that slept in? Yeah, it was.
He slept in. It's okay. Yeah. It's all good. He was training hard down the ATT, but you got to feel bad for the dude. I mean, come on, man. The guy's daughter was murdered last year, and since then he's fought twice. So he's
no easy fights either. You're fighting Overeem, you're fighting Volkov. It's tough, right? So
yeah, but you got to be objective. And as a fighter, I think he's a very limited fighter. We did see him get a couple of nice knockouts, like the Oleinik knockout, but Oleinik's an old guy that's kind of chinny. So while Harris is a borderline top 15 guy, I never bought him as a top 10 guy, James. And I hope they give him a layup in his next fight because I'd like to see him get back in the win column as a fellow human being. But I don't think this guy's an elite fighter. Whereas Volkov, I do think is a legitimate top 10 guy.
Oh, he is. And he's going to get a big fight next. You could do that Overeem fight. They were supposed to fight a couple of years ago, or I think it was last year, and then they had to reschedule it. He's in a good spot regardless. Yeah, he lost to Curtis Blades the fight before, but Volkov's a guy that we should keep an eye on in the heavyweight division, as I think one day we could potentially see him fight for a title. And I'm with you on Harris. Give him a bounce back fight. The guy's been through a lot. Let's get him back in the win column there. We'll just talk about this last fight, and then I'll kind of zoom through the rest because this was a 6-fight main card. We don't want to go through every single fight, but this Phil Hawes and Jacob Malkoun fight, Hawes looked amazing. 19-second knockout. Good for him. Hawes is a guy that we've been hearing about for years. Gets his first UFC victory. But I talked about this yesterday on the Hammer MMA. Shout out to Steve Jeffrey and our buddy Liam out in Toronto. Why the hell was this guy on a UFC main card, this Jacob Malkoun guy? I know he's a buddy of Whittaker's, but if you have 4 fights, you should not get a UFC contract. There's no way they should do that. That's a contender series fighter, in my opinion. It showed in this fight. Haas absolutely took this guy's head off. No legit competition. Like, that's one thing. I know they got to fill up cards, but like, you couldn't find anyone else other than a guy who's buddies with Whittaker who had 4 fights. The matchmaking here was dumb, in my opinion, and maybe it was done on purpose to make Haas look even better. But I hated this fight from an on paper perspective. When you got a guy in Phil Haas who's fought everyone like leading up to him making his debut, and you got a guy in Malkoun who fought a bunch of nobodies out in Australia. What'd you think?
I'm completely with you. Like, I know that they want to do a 6-fight main card, and they were talking about that. There were some injuries, James. Like, we have to mention the Islam Makhachev fight versus Rafael dos Anjos. That was supposed to be in the spot, so it is a short notice fight. But I'll be honest, like, I'm looking at this fight, and I'm like, who is this guy, right? And everyone's saying, like, this guy's got a good chance to knock out Phil Haas. Phil Haas has been finished before on Contender Series, and I'm looking at James, and I'm scratching my head. Like, I'm like, why did they book this fight? Then I found out, obviously, he's Whittaker's buddy, so it just made sense for them to book it. But really, this was on the main card, James. Why was Casey Kenny and Nathaniel Wood on the main card? That was buried on the prelims, James.
Yeah.
If you're going to put a 6-fight main card and promote that, at least put 6 UFC quality fights. This was a Contender Series quality fight.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. I'm going to go through the rest of the card, and then I'll get your thoughts and some of the stuff I say here. You know, old parting shot style. We used to do this all the time. Lauren Murphy gets the win over Lilia Shakarova. You know, she finished the fight. You and I talked about this in the DMs. You won Andrade next. I think Murphy, I think you got to reward fighters for getting wins in their weight class. And I think Murphy getting the win here, it wasn't her fault that Calvillo pulled out. I'm not like I'd favor Murphy if she was to fight the winner of Shevchenko Maia, but I still think you got to reward her. I think you could do Andrade and Calvillo, but we'll see what the UFC decides to do. Either way, great performance from Lauren Murphy fighting a newcomer on short notice who didn't really look like she belonged in there. How about Ankalaev getting the knockout win over Kutalava? You know, finally a decisive stoppage here, but I think that was going to happen anyways. Ankalaev, quite the talent at 205. Tai Tuivasa saving his job, getting the win over Stefan Struve. I think it's it for Stefan Struve here. 32 years old, but like 50 in fight years. He's taken a lot of damage. I still remember that knockout to Mark Hunt in Japan when he got finished in a fight that he was winning, and he ended up letting Mark Hunt stand up with him and get knocked out there. Struve's taken too much damage. I hope it's it for him in the UFC, and I hope Bellator doesn't sign him either if this is the end of the road for him. But loser of 4 or 5, I don't think we'll see much from there. Tuivasa, they're going to try and build up again. The Kenny Wood fight was just spectacular. If you guys missed one fight on this card, go back and watch this one. Casey Kenny really coming into his element here. Just one loss in the promotion to Merab Dvalishvili. This guy might be the dark horse at 135, Adam. I love everything about this guy with his stand-up, with his wrestling. He's really putting it all together, and he's still under 30, so there's a lot of room to grow in that division. How about Rakhmanov getting the win over Oliveira? I got a lot of shit last week for picking this guy over Oliveira, and I said, look, Oliveira is not what you guys think. He's not as good as advertised. Great to see this guy from Kazakhstan get the win here in his debut. Really impressed with that performance there. The Down Jug and ALVEY fight, no issue with the draw. I thought, you know, for sure there was some moments in that fight. Could have gone either way, but good showing from ALVEY, but I think that might be the end of the road for him in the UFC. How about Miranda Maverick getting a big win in her debut, finishing JOJUA? I'm with you there. I saw your tweets on Saturday. If this was a male fight, they wouldn't have stopped that. I don't know why they stopped it over a nose break. We've seen fights continue on from there. That was just absolutely brutal. But Maverick, someone they're going to continue to build. 23 years old, super talented fighter in that division. And then, of course, opening up the card, Joel Alvarez given a bit of a layup fight, continuing to build off the win over Joe Duffy, getting the win over Yakovlev, who's got to be cut at this point. This guy seems to be fed to every prospect there is on the UFC roster. So just your quick thoughts on the rest of the card, and then we'll move on to Bellator.
Yeah, I'll go through it really quick. So the Lauren Murphy fight is interesting because you're on the side that she should get the title shot. I'm with Andrade. So I watched her press conference, James, and John Morgan asked a question, and she's like, hold on a sec, I have a question for you guys. Like, why am I ranked so low? And she goes, you know what? I think I should get the title shot, but if anyone else does, it's going to be Andrade. So she seemed okay with it. So I think either of those fighters could get it next. I think they're both more deserving than Jennifer Maia. I'll tell you that right now. Who is getting the next title shot. She shouldn't even be there. Ankalaev looked great. I think this guy is definitely a top 10 guy probably at this point at 205. Don't know who they match him up with, but like guys like, you know, Misha would be a good fight, James, for him. Yeah. It'd be a fun fight, or Johnny Walker, something like that. Struve needs to have a conversation with his family and his coaches, and they need to tell him to retire. It's hard to watch this guy fight. He gets knocked out almost every fight for like the last decade, James. Like, look how many knockout losses he had in the UFC. So he needs to retire. He really does. Kenny looked amazing. Rakhmanov looked great. I'm very high on him. I liked him too in this fight, James. I thought Jung lost. I think that people that bet on him, including myself, got really lucky with the draw because I thought ALVEY actually won that fight.
Yeah. And
the JOJUA stoppage was horrible. And I can't believe people are actually defending that stop. Like, she had a cut in her nose. Why is the fight stopped? And Alvarez looked great. So overall, James, great card, awesome
Yeah.
card, great finish, epic card. Definitely a card to remember. And I'm so glad we got to talk about it today, man.
And more importantly, loved how it was on in the morning. Like here on Pacific
Yes.
time, it started at 7 a.m. the prelims. I'm up that time anyways. I'm a dad. More of these morning cards. I'm a big fan of them because guess what? I got to enjoy my Saturday night. I got to do some other stuff. So I'm a huge fan of the day cards because it does take a lot out of you when you're going from the afternoon to evening in my case, or in your case, it's evening to like, close to past midnight. So I like the earlier cards for sure. Just two quick rants here, and then we're going to get on to Bellator here. We talked about Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think this is, I want to talk about Khabib Nurmagomedov and him retiring. I think this retirement sticks. I talked a little bit about it there in the breakdown. Khabib Nurmagomedov is not a guy that goes out here for money, for fame, for, anything else other than just, trying to prove his legacy. And that's something that his late father instilled in him. So when people think that, oh, it's just he's just saying this to get the GSP fight. No, I think Khabib's done. And like I mentioned, he's done everything he needs to do at lightweight. There's no incentive for him to go up to welterweight at this point, especially when it's already log jammed up there. And we've got Chimaev up there now. You've got Leon Edwards. There's Colby, Masvidal. There's all these guys right now fighting for 170. For him to go up and sort of disrupt that division, I don't think it makes sense. Khabib's in his early 30s. We should be encouraging fighter retirements like this as opposed to saying, oh, I'd love to see him back, this and that, because, oftentimes guys hold on a little bit too long. There's guys right now in bare knuckle fighting that should have retired 5 years ago. And we don't want, not that Khabib would ever be like that, but I think this retirement sticks. I think it makes a lot of sense, and all the power to him, and happy trails. I mean, great career for Khabib. He did everything he needed to do. It's very rare to go in this sport and go undefeated like he has. So kudos to him. Never had a steroid test. That test went positive or anything of that nature. So kudos to Khabib. And I am pretty certain this is it for him, as opposed to a guy like Henry Cejudo. Your thoughts on his retirement?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. For me, it's when he retired, it reminded me a lot, James, of 7 years ago when Johnny Hendricks fought GSP, and we had the parting shot the next day, and you said, I think GSP's going to retire. And I didn't believe you, James. I said, no way. You, I think, predict this a little better than these retirements, because I always feel like guys want to hang on as long as they can because they want to make as much money as they can. And it's the pride. Look at Anderson. He's 45 still fighting this weekend, right? So I think you're 100% right, James. Like, guy like 32 years old in his prime that still has his wits about him. This is amazing. This reminds me of when Barry Sanders retired from the Detroit Lions.
Great analogy. Yeah, I was thinking of him too.
Right in his prime, right? Like he could have set all the records for rushing, but he retired, and he had his wits about him, James. And I think it's a great move by him to be retired. But I thought GSP was going to retire, and I didn't think he'd come back, and he came back. I think we'll see him fight again, and I do think we'll see him fight GSP one day. I think it'll be 165 pounds. I don't know when it's going to happen, James. I'd say within the next 2 years, though. That's my prediction.
Okay, we'll come back to this conversation, and everyone can make fun of me if that ends up happening. And then the other thing I wanted, and then the other fight I wanted to talk about quickly is before we move along here, another sort of rant here. I think they got to wait to determine who Israel Adesanya's next opponent is. We talked about Robert Whittaker getting the win. All these people are like rematch. Look, Izzy just knocked out Whittaker last year. I know that's a year ago, but I'm not in a rush to see that fight. I don't think Rob's in a rush to do that. He talked about how when he was champion, he was kind of being forced to fight all the time. Let the guy take a breather. And I say, wait to see what happens with Jack Hermanson and Darren Till. Now, look, a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't want to see Jack Hermanson fight for a title, but he's coming off a huge win over Calvin Gastelum in his last fight. If he beats Darren Till, especially if he gets a finish, something that Robert Whittaker did not do in his last fight, in the fight before, I should say, I think you absolutely got to give the shot to Hermanson, because let's not forget, this time last year, it was Hermanson, very close to getting a title shot himself. Jared Cannonier spoiled those plans, knocked out Hermanson, but Hermanson came back in a big way and got a flawless performance over Calvin Gastelum. If he goes out there and beats Darren Till, I'd have no issue with him fighting for the title. And a lot of people are like, well, who has he beat? Whatever. Look at the winning streak. If he gets his win here, he will be 6-1 in his last 7 fights. That's very much worthy of a title shot, in my opinion. I think it's an intriguing matchup because Hermanson's got a great ground game. So if he's able to take Izzy there, we've never really seen him tested, it could get interesting. So I say let's wait to see what happens with Adesanya in terms of his next opponent. If Hermanson loses and Till wins, you give the shot to Whittaker. If Hermanson wins impressively, I have no issues with Jack Hermanson getting the next title shot. I know it's not a popular opinion. I know people want to see, Adesanya Jones or Adesanya Blakovic. The guy's got 2 title defenses. Let's see him clean out the division, and then let's talk about super fights. So I know you're going to disagree with me on this one, Adam, but let's hear it.
I don't necessarily disagree. The thing is, I think he kind of has cleaned out a lot of the guys because he beat them on the way up, James. Like these guys like Derek Brunson and Jacare, all these guys, right? He beat them on the way up. But there are still challenges out there. Like, I think Hermanson's a great challenge. You know what? Even Till, that'd be something. If Till beats Hermanson, would the UFC go and give Till a title shot because they know it's a big fight?
They might, especially if Whittaker doesn't want to come back right away.
Yeah, exactly. I love Robert Whittaker. He's a great guy. He already had his shot at Izzy, and he failed miserably. I don't really see that fight going any differently, James. I think they could book that fight. It seems like it's going to happen because based on Dana White's comments. why not take another month, wait for that fight? I think it's December 7th, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that.
Yeah.
Wait for that fight, December 5th, actually. Wait for that fight, James, see what happens. Especially if Hermanson, imagine Hermanson goes out there and finishes Till. How if Till even finishes Hermanson, right? Like, the winner of that fight's definitely the mix.
Yeah, I think we got to wait. We're always so reactionary when fights end. They're like, we got to book this right away. And it's like, no, there's other fights in the division that we need to sort of see settle a little bit. So I'm of that nature. It's a little bit more old school, but we'll see what the UFC decides to do there. All right, we got a Bellator card on Thursday, Adam. One of my favorite fighters of all time. I haven't been shy about this. Gegard Mousasi back in action fighting Douglas Lima. We're not going to do a huge breakdown of this card, but I did have a chance to speak with Mousasi ahead of the fight, and he mentioned that he got kind of heavy during COVID. So I don't know if that'll play a role here, but I like Mousasi in this fight. Bias aside, I think if this fight stays standing, you give the edge to him. He's got a lot more experience, not even just in MMA, but he's got the kickboxing experience, the boxing experience. He trains with world-class K1 kickboxers all the time. Nothing against American Top Team Atlanta, but I think this is Mousasi's fight to lose, in my opinion. Lima's looked great. Good win over Rory McDonald in his last fight, winning the title. But you got to remember, Mousasi used to fight at light heavyweight. Lima's coming up. I think Lima's always kind of been a middleweight. He's a very big welterweight, but I think Mousasi's going to take this one unless he just has like an absolute dud of a performance like he did against Lovato Jr. But I don't think we're going to see any takedowns. I don't think this fight's going to go to the ground. I think if it stays standing, you give the edge to Mousasi. Who are you leaning towards on that one?
It's one of the best fights, I think, of the year, potentially. Like, this is an amazing fight that's kind of flying under the radar, James, because it is in Bellator, and also it's on Thursday night. I don't think they did a good job of explaining to fans that their shows are on Thursdays now. This is a tough fight to call, James. Like, I love both guys. Also, I want to hear your impersonation of Kermit, if you don't mind.
Oh, we'll do it off air. I don't want to get anyone in trouble here, but
sounds good. I love Mousasi, man. You know that, James. I remember the first time we hung out, and you were like, "This guy's my favorite fighter." So you've loved him forever, and I've loved Douglas Lima forever because I remember watching him fight at Casino.
I was at that fight too when he knocked out Ben Saunders.
Thank you. Remember that one, 2011 or 12? I can't remember what it was now, but. He's been fighting for a long time at a high level. I think, Douglas Lima, we've already saw Gegard Mousasi in the UFC. He was a top 5 middleweight. I think Lima would be a top 5 welterweight. So I have a lot of respect for both guys. I'll be honest, James, I'm leaning slightly towards the dog here in Lima. I've been really impressed by what he's done lately. I think he's got a lot of momentum coming in this fight. And I do believe that the Lovato Jr. fight, I know it's a different matchup because it's a grappler, but I do think that Mousasi showed some holes and maybe a slight signs of decline. It's a super close fight. I look at the odds today. It was really close.
Well, blitzbet.eu for audience here in Canada. If you're Canadian, which Adam and I are, you can go to blitzbet.eu right now. You can look at the odds right now. Gegard Mousasi, the favorite at -161, Douglas Lima +130. It's a close fight. Like I picked Gegard, but if Lima won, it wouldn't surprise me. I just think if it stays standing, you've got a guy who's had K1 level kickboxing experience. This guy won a K1 tournament. He fought at heavyweight even. I mean, this is a guy that's fought everywhere, and a guy in Lima who, good wins and stuff. But again, I think when you're going up a guy in Gegard who has such notable striking, I think it's going to be interesting. But we'll see. There's definitely some value on Lima here because it is a very close fight. So
I'm with you, James. It's gonna be a great fight. Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. And then just quickly, the co-main event, I just wanted to mention this just for a second here. Henry Corrales taking on Brandon Gertz. Gertz dropping down to featherweight for this fight. That's never a good sign when a guy's in their mid-30s dropping down a weight class. Corrales fought nothing but killers his last 2 fights. 2-fight losing streak, but lost to Caldwell, lost to Juan Archuleta. I think Corrales bounces back in a big way here. And we got to also mention Bobby Volker's on this card, Adam. A little Strikeforce throwback. We got Mousasi headlining the Strikeforce, former Strikeforce champ. We've got Bobby Volker in the cage, 41 years old, taking on Sabah Hamasi. I don't know who's going to win this fight, but I'm just so happy to see Volker back. And the guy's still knocking people out at his age. It's pretty incredible. Your thoughts on a bit of a Strikeforce throwback on this one?
It is a Strikeforce throwback because both guys were in Strikeforce. Hamasi actually fought on the card that had Melvin Manhoef against Robbie Lawler, if you can believe it or not. Like, it was that. He's been in Strikeforce too. So I like the matchup. James, he was impressive in his last fight against Curtis Millender. The way he beat him, he pretty much dominated him with the grappling. So I actually lean a little bit towards Hamasi here. I know Volker's been on a hot streak in Shamrock. He's been winning a lot of fights. Long layoff.
Hasn't fought in, I think, more than a year.
He's 40 years old, 41 maybe. He's getting up there in age, right? I kind of lean towards Hamasi just on that. And the other fight, I love Corrales in that fight. Corrales is one of the more underrated guys, I think. You look at his level of competition, James. He's only lost to the top guys. He's a really good fighter. He should. I think he'll be a big favorite in that fight. I don't know if there's odds up yet. I don't think there is. He'll be a big favorite there.
And if you remember, I was the one who broke the story about him fighting Gertz. Got the interview up on the
That's right.
Scrap. You guys can go check that out there. New 4-fight contract too for Henry Corrales as well. Just quickly on Bellator, one last thing. We've got Desiree Yanez making her debut for them. She's a pretty solid prospect of LFA, and Combate who's going to be making her debut on the card against Veda Ortega. Nick Newell's on this card taking on Zach Zane. We've got Taylor Johnson, guy who's on Contender Series, lost, came over to Bellator, beat Ed Ruth. Now he's fighting this Johnny Eblin kid who's also undefeated. So good matchup there. Justin Scoggins' brother, Jared Scoggins, a bantamweight prospect, is on this card against Toby Misek. Misek, of course, coming off that big win over Eric Perez in his last Bellator fight. Adam Borach is on this card as well. You got Jake Hager fighting on this card too, the return of the former WWE star. And then, of course, Ty Gorder, the middleweight prospect, making his return as well. So this is a pretty good card. I think this card's actually a little bit better than the UFC. We'll preview that in 1 second, but Bellator with a pretty solid offering here on a Thursday night. So we are going to move on.
Deep it was. Sorry, James. I just didn't realize how deep this card was. Like Adam Borch is a great fighter, and he's way deep
super good prospect. So yeah,
I'm glad you pointed it out. Also, the Jake Hager fight. Can they not find someone decent to fight this guy? Another 2-0.
Well, they're both 2-0, right? So that's what you got to do.
Sure,
Otherwise, you're going to have an Aaron Pico situation where he's fighting someone more experienced, he gets knocked out, and you kind of lose all that momentum. So it's a tough build up for that. But yeah. That's where we're going to go with that. All right, let's get to Uriah Hall, Anderson Silva. Like we mentioned off the top, not going to go through the prelims. I talked about this at length on my show this morning, but let's start on the main card. We've got Bobby Green, a favorite of ours, Adam. We've interviewed him ages ago, taking on Thiago Moises. And right now, if you look on blitzbet.eu, Bobby Green, the favorite at -294, Thiago Moises +235. I really like Bobby Green in this fight. If Thiago Moises can't get this to the ground and it stays standing, this is Bobby Green's fight all day. Way better striking, way more experience too. Bobby Green, 38 career fights. Thiago Moises just 17. Let's be honest. Thiago Moises was losing that first round against Michael Johnson. It wasn't until he got the fight to the canvas in the second round he was able to submit him. Not an easy task. Michael Johnson, tough to finish, but Bobby Green is much more experienced, in my opinion, in that regard. Bobby Green's last submission loss, I think, was like 2009. I don't see that happening here. I think this is Green's fight to lose. Who's your pick on this one, Adam?
I absolutely love Bobby Green in this fight, James. And another guy I've been high on forever. We had him on the show years ago when he beat James Krause, another guy that is still doing stuff at his age. Amazing, right? But these guys do so many years later. He's looked phenomenal, James. You talk about guys who have really just taken the opportunity and ran with it during the COVID-19 pandemic. Bobby Green, 3-0, beat Clay Guida, beat Landon Venata, beat Alan Patrick, and he's looked phenomenal in these fights. I expect him to have another great showing here. Thiago Moises, he is coming off the win over Michael Johnson, and credit to him for getting that submission, James, but he was getting tooled. I don't even think he landed a strike in that fight. It's just that Michael Johnson, how many submission losses does he have? He has 9 submission losses. He's terrible on the ground. So looking back, I don't it's a good win by name value, but is it that great a win? I don't know. I like Bobby Green. I would absolutely play him this weekend. In some capacity. I think he'll be a very popular parlay target, James, for people. I expect him to probably win decision here.
That's how I'm going too. I might want to look at that decision prop as well. You might get some better value than the close to 3-1 odds because Green does typically go the distance. I think his last finish has been a while ago, so maybe want to look at that instead of the full out just pick there. Let's move along to the heavyweight division. We've got Greg Hardy taking on Maurice Green, and if you go on blitzbet.eu right now, Greg Hardy is the favorite at -303. Maurice Green +240. Here's the thing, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this. Guys, look at the tail of the tape here, because a lot of people being like, oh, can Hardy deal with Maurice Green's reach? They're about the same size. I think people forget that. Hardy is a big heavyweight. I know this because I saw him fight live last year in Boston. Greg Hardy is 6'5" with an 80.5-inch reach. Mo Green is 6'7" with an 82-inch reach. So a 2-inch height and reach advantage for Mo Green is going to determine the fight? I don't think so. I like Hardy a lot here. Am I going to bet -390 on a heavyweight fight? Probably not. That's a little too steep for, he's -303. Am I going to bet that? A little steep for my liking, but I would look at the Hardy inside the distance prop. We've seen Mo Green get finished before, even though this guy comes from a kickboxing background. Remember, Sergey Pavlovich knocked him out in the first round. I think Hardy can absolutely do this. Adam, honestly, what really makes me want to pick Hardy here, aside from the fact that I think he's a lot more athletic and I think he's getting better every fight, was just how bad Mo Green looked in his last fight against John Vellante, who is only fighting at heavyweight because he's not disciplined enough to get to 205. I was not impressed with that win. He ended up getting it in the third round. That was a fight where it should have been an easy win for Green. It wasn't. I really like Greg Hardy here, Adam. Who are you picking in this one?
Well, I mean, you're making a convincing argument, James, because honestly, I was kind of leaning towards Green a little bit. I agree completely. He looked horrible in that last fight. I can't believe John Vellante got submitted like that. That was embarrassing. That's cut worthy, although he's getting another fight against Jay Collier, another guy who should be fighting at 205. But anyways, as far as Mo Green goes, I mean, this guy is so inconsistent. But when he looks good, he looks good. And he's got, the thing about him is he's well-rounded. He's got submissions and striking. So he's a dangerous guy. And James, it's heavyweight, right? So Greg Hardy, yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. Better athlete, no doubt about it. He is the bigger guy. You know, maybe not as tall, but I think he is the bigger man. The thing about Mo Green that bothers me is the way he fights sometimes. He kind of fights like he doesn't like want to necessarily be there, and then he'll pull a submission out of somewhere. It's kind of weird, right? Whereas Hardy, I think, is the very aggressive guy. He's always walking forward. I think Hardy could win this fight. I think Green could pull off the upset, though, James. So, you know, I don't want to be in the fence here, guys, but I would say it's dog or pass right now. I got to think about it a little bit more, James. I got to think about this one a little bit more. I think your argument was very convincing, but just based on the fact it's a heavyweight fight, I kind of lean towards the plus 250 on Maurice Green. And he does have multiple paths to victory because he does have the ground game too. So it's one of those fights where I personally won't touch this fight, but I think it is dog or pass. Yeah,
I think, well, and I've said this before, I think the odds are too high on Hardy. I wouldn't bet the minus 303 like I was mentioning there, but we also got to point out that Hardy's only lost in the Octagon outside of the Crowder one, which was kind of a dumb DQ thing, but the Volkov loss, which now looking back, that's not that bad. Volkov just knocked out Walt Harris this weekend. Here's a guy who's only got, what, a couple losses at heavyweight, and the fact that Hardy went the distance with him, did not get finished, considering how much more experience Volkov has, I think it makes him look even better. Look, say what you want about Greg Hardy outside the cage. You can't deny the fact this guy is very talented as an athlete in the Octagon. That's another reason why I think people will be blinded by this. I think people, you know, they don't like Hardy, so they're like, go Mo Green. But I mean, look, people, I know so many people betting Jorgen De Castro in the last fight, and Hardy beat him. So I'm just saying, just keep that in mind when you're looking to bet this fight. Let's go to the middleweight division. Really exciting fight here. Kevin Holland stepping up on short notice, taking on I'm going to butcher this here, Muradov. But either way, Kevin Holland, the slight favorite in this one, coming in at minus 169. His opponent plus 135. I really like Kevin Holland here. If you look at Muradov's last two wins, they're two guys that I don't even believe are in the UFC anymore. DeChirio clearly is, and I think Trevor Smith got cut as well. Hasn't fought since December. Holland's been on a roll. I know he didn't look amazing in his last fight against Darren Stewart, but Darren Stewart has the tendency to do that to a lot of his opponents. Holland's, I mean, he lost to Thiago Santos, right? Debut, tough outing there. Lost to Brendan Allen, but let's not forget, Adam, he was winning that first round and just made a mistake in the second. Allen capitalized and was able to submit him. But other than that, Holland's looked great, had the knockout over Joaquin Buckley. Still only 27 years old. He's going to have a height and reach advantage in this fight. I really like Kevin Holland here. And I think getting him at, you know, just under 2-1 odds, I think there is some value there. Where are you going in this one?
What's Muradov's odds at Blitzbet right now?
Blitzbet right now, he is at plus 135.
This is a tough fight to call, James. I'm super. I know you've been high on Kevin Holland for a few years. Like, you were the one telling me about him originally, like when first Contender Series or whatever. I've loved him. I love this guy. I think he's the perfect guy for the UFC because he's always in there. He puts on exciting fights. He's talking smack in the Octagon. He's a fun guy to watch. But there's something with this Muradov guy that really intrigues me, man. 13 straight wins right now. He's Floyd Mayweather's only UFC fighter. So Floyd backs this guy. I've been impressed by this guy. I'm with you completely, though. I mean, the Trevor Smith's not in the UFC anymore. The Chirico is maybe borderline UFC. Those aren't impressive wins, but I can't ignore 13 straight wins. And he's finishing almost everyone he's fighting. Like, you look at his record, James, it's almost all knockouts. And to be fair, the guys he fought in Europe weren't that bad. I'm kind of leaning towards Muradov a little bit. I love Kevin Holland. I hate picking against this guy because I thought he looked outstanding, by the way, against Joaquin Buckley. Everyone's talking about Buckley. What about Kevin Holland? You knocked him out, James. I'm kind of leaning towards Muradov a little bit. I think he'll win the decision. That's my pick here.
Let's get to the next fight here on blitzbet.eu, the co-main event. Bryce Mitchell taking on Andre Fili. I'll give you the odds here. We got Andre Fili as the underdog at plus 136, Bryce Mitchell at minus 169. I'm going to get your pick here as I quickly fix my light here, which just went out. So I'll take it away, Adam.
No worries. I'm really curious to hear what James picks on this one, guys, because I didn't hear a show this morning, but this is a tough fight to call too. I mean, you look at the odds. I think they opened actually as a pick 'em. So the sports books even had trouble kind of picking who they thought would be favored here. Bryce Mitchell's been impressive, no doubt, in the UFC. He had that twister submission. He's looked good. His grappling is fantastic. But Andre Fili, I think a little bit more well-rounded. I think the striking is a lot better. The Jordan fight was a split decision, James. We all thought that should have been unanimous. You look, even the Sodiq Yusuff fight, he could have won that fight too. So you look at it through his record. I'm looking at it right now. It's very consistent at times. But I think that overall, he's a more well-rounded guy with more experience in the UFC. And I do like Andre Fili here a little bit, James. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts are, because I didn't hear your show this morning, but I lean towards Fili a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you say that. I think kind of like you were talking about a couple fights before, if you're going to bet this fight, the value for sure is on Andre Fili. Way more experience, 29 fights compared to Mitchell's 13. People also forget that Mitchell lost on tough to Brad Katona, who's a bantamweight. Mitchell is beatable. And look, great winning streak heading into this one. The win over Charles Rosa, just like a total dominant performance here. But we're talking about a guy in Charles Rosa who missed a couple years, getting a little bit over, had a lot of injuries. I mean, you could look at that, and then he beat Matt Sales and Bobby Moffett, and Bobby Moffitt's not in the UFC anymore. Tyler Diamond's not in the UFC anymore. It's easy to fall in love with Mitchell's submission game. And let's be honest here, Fili has been submitted before. Max Holloway submitted him. Godfredo Pepe submitted him as well. But you just look at who he's training with. He's training with guys that have high-level jiu-jitsu at Team Alpha Male. So it's not like it's something he hasn't seen. Now, I will point this out. If you guys watch our interview here with Fili on the Line Movement channel, Fili talked about how I might take this to the ground with Mitchell. That's a terrible idea. Why play to your opponent's strengths? It reminds me of the Andre Arlovsky and Brett Rogers fight in Strikeforce, where Arlovsky could have easily taken Brett Rogers to the ground and submitted him, but his pride got the better of him, and he said, you know what, I'm going to knock this guy out. Well, what happened? Brett Rogers knocked out Arlovsky, right? So I think it's a little bit risky for him to say that. I don't know if it's gamesmanship or if he actually believes that, but if he is going to take this to the ground, that's just a dumb move on Fili's part. But I think if it stays standing, Fili can absolutely win this fight. However, saying that, I think we've kind of seen the ceiling with Andre Fili. We know that he's a decent guy. He can get some good wins here and there. Beating a Jourdain's certainly good. But I think with Mitchell, every fight we're seeing a little bit more and a little bit better here. And I think the ground game is elite. I think the striking's coming along as well. So here's how I'm going on this one. I'm going to pick Bryce Mitchell because I do think there's more upside with him here. But the value for sure is on Andre Fili. And keep your eyes glued to blitzbet.eu and the odds, because Mitchell's a fan favorite. I wouldn't really say Fili is anymore at this point. I think they've kind of got off that train a while ago. I think this line's going to get hammered even more because people love Bryce Mitchell. If that's the case, you could get some serious value here on Andre Fili as the underdog. Absolutely going to lay something on him just because of the experience, like I said. So, like I said, the pick's going to be Mitchell, but if Fili pulls this off, won't be surprised at all. It might be a little bit too soon for Bryce Mitchell. We will see on Saturday night. Let's get to the main event here. Uriah Hall taking on Anderson Silva right now, and looking on blitzbet.eu, you've got Uriah Hall as the favorite at -222, Anderson Silva +180. I think people forget that Uriah Hall is not some young fighter. Uriah Hall's 36 years old, and while he has looked very impressive over the last little bit, I think the move to Fortis MMA has paid dividends for him. Back-to-back wins heading into this one. He's supposed to fight Yoel Romero earlier this year. Yoel's out of the fight, so it's been more than a year since Hall's fought. For Silva, it's been very long, May of 2019 since we last see him fight. So two guys coming in off layoffs as well. Hall should be the favorite. I'm picking Hall in this fight, but this is one of those fights where I'm just going to stay away from. I think if anything, Hall probably will win a decision. The problem with Uriah Hall is he's got such a weird career. He gets like big wins over like Mousasi and Thiago Santos, but then he loses fights to like John Howard and like fights where it's like you think he should look a lot better. And then some of his other losses are pretty notable, like Brunson and Costa and Whittaker. And it's like, where is this guy? Like, what Uriah Hall are we going to get? Because Adam, we've seen it. Uriah Hall said some really good fights. He's had some real stinkers too, where it's just like he's not engaging and it's not very good. And with Silva, he's a total wild card at this point in his career. He lost his last fight due to a kind of like an injury. He lost to ADESANYA'S, and ADESANYA, it wasn't a very good fight. So there's too many red flags in this fight for me. I'm going to pick Hall by decision, but I would personally stay away from this one. Where are you leaning on this one, Adam?
Funny anecdote, James. So I was watching Dragon's Den on Friday night, and they had Jason Doomsday, who used to fight in the UFC. Yep. He actually presented a pitch. He lives in BC now. And it was like some fitness equipment. And he's like, they were like, do you have any athletes that are using it? He said Uriah Hall. So I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, oh, wow, it's pretty cool. Hearing Uriah Hall's name on Dragon's Den. Anyways, yeah, as far as this fight goes, how do you pick Anderson Silva here, James? You can't pick Anderson Silva. 45 years old. That's an automatic fade. He's the oldest fighter in the UFC, one of the oldest fighters ever fought in the UFC. He's coming off a devastating leg kick injury. I was at that fight, James, in Brazil. He got kicked to the leg, and I thought he'd re-broken the leg that he had fought when he fought Chris Weidman. So, he's looked terrible, and yes, he does have the win over Brunson. I thought he lost that fight too. The Diaz fight, it was a win, overturned because he tested positive for PEDs. He's not the same guy anymore. It's sad that there's new fans coming into the sport that are seeing Anderson like this. This is a diminished Anderson, and this is why I'm glad Khabib is stepping away, James, because I don't want to see him fight like this. Anderson's pride is getting in the way of him. He's like, I want to fight, I want to win. I don't see any way he beats Uriah Hall. I know Uriah Hall is an older guy. I agree completely with you, James. People forget that, but I just think he wins this fight. I think the reflexes will be there for him in this fight. I'm predicting Uriah Hall pretty much. I don't know if he's going to dominate the fight because stylistically Anderson could hang with him, but I think for sure he wins, James. And I think it is worth playing Uriah Hall here because I don't see Anderson Silva winning. He's an automatic fade at this point. I'm not saying Uriah Hall's great by any means. He's an inconsistent guy, but stylistically, I just think with the speed, the reflexes, and the age difference, I think he will win this fight. I am predicting a decision, though, like you. I think there's going to be a lot of respect shown in this fight, and I don't see him getting the knockout. So decision for Uriah Hall. That's my pick.
Adam, you absolutely killed it today, man. Loved having you on the show here. Love co-hosting with you, just like the good old days. A lot of good insight. People got to follow Adam on Twitter if they aren't already. I'll give you the not the last word, but I'll give you an opportunity here to plug all your work, because you work for a couple different outlets, always doing a great job and always on the pulse of things. And by the way, I got to point this out too. Like, people think that because Adam and I don't do the podcast anymore, we don't talk. I probably talk to Adam more than anyone on DMs all the time. We're always talking about stuff going on. So Adam's just a great guy to follow. A lot of really good insight, and so happy we can make this happen here today. And we'll definitely get you on again. But Adam, floor is yours, man.
I truly appreciate that, James. I mean, me and you've been friends since the beginning, so like, you'll always be my friend, dude. You guys can follow me on Twitter at MMAdamMartin. I actually have my own podcast. I do it Tuesday at 10 a.m. on MMAOddsBreaker.com and our YouTube channel. We break down that week's UFC card with my co-host Cole Sheldon. I also do it at 10 a.m. on Thursday on the MMAOddsBreaker.com YouTube channel. I'm always available at BJPenn.com and MMARatings.net. I have occasional articles there as well. Really appreciate you having me on, James. It was a lot of fun to talk about UFC with you, man, and Bellator.
Awesome. And thank you guys for watching today. Like I mentioned off the top, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your friends. My best interviews every week end up on here. And we just, like I said, interviewed Andre Feely a couple weeks ago. We got everything you need for Saturday night's card, the UFC Vegas 12 card. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Really appreciate you guys watching. We will be back here a week today doing another edition of Octagon Outlook at 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time, live here on the Line Movement YouTube channel. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks again to Adam, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.